Political and Economic Freedom Fighters President Julius Malema and his deputy Floyd Shivambu have been fingered in the VBS scandal. In that leaked affidavit by Matodzi, the EFF former chairperson, Advocate Dali Mpofu, and Public Interest South Africa founder Tshifhiwa Matodzi joining me in studio for this discussion. Gentlemen, good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time. I'll start with you, Mr. Mpofu. The VBS saga resurfaces again, and allegations are made against the leadership of the EFF. And in the main, it is the president of your party and the deputy. How does the EFF respond?
Well, Claude, you know, in a way, we're just tired of having to say the same thing about this. Every time somebody speaks, it's blown up as if something new has come up. Now, the latest, of course, is this Matodzi affidavit. Now, the most important thing about that is that actually nothing new comes out of that affidavit, nothing at all. If anything, that affidavit contains information which absolves the persons that you have liberally said that they've been fingered. Because Matodzi says, remember in the previous, all the previous reports, Mutao and Dali Mpofu and all that, it was said that these were monies that were paid to the persons that you've mentioned. Matodzi now says, no, this was a donation to the EFF, not to the persons that you are mentioning. And he says that he had of course he does say that he had a meeting with them, but he specifically says that it was a donation to the EFF. So there are three things that need to be separated. One is, let's call it the Zuma loan, because he says that what sparked this whole thing was because the EFF was criticizing the Zuma loan publicly, and it was damaging to the organization. So he felt that he needed to meet. Now, that's very normal. I can tell you, I've been in the corporate world. I've been a so-called corporate affairs and stakeholder management. I've even been a CEO. That's what happens. If your company, someone is talking about it, you either go yourself, if you're a CEO, or send your corporate affairs people to explain, as he says in the affidavit. So he says he went to explain the Zuma loan, and that's why he had the meeting. Now, it turns out that he says at that meeting, he also said, look, our constituencies are the same, and offered, this is very important, offered a donation himself. Now, you might want to say, well, why would he offer a donation? The answer is that companies offer donations. We've just had now an election where tens and tens of millions were given to political parties. And then, of course, he then says that this donation, which he offered, was then paid over, or there was this arrangement that there must be a bank account and so on. Now, if you compare that to, for example, what he says happened with the ANC and the SACP. Now, he says those parties solicited or asked for donations, unlike the case of the EFF, where he says he offered it himself because of the coincidence of constituencies. I can't remember the exact wording in the affidavit. So the point I'm making, Paul, is simply this. This Matodzi affidavit, if anything, sheds better light as to who the beneficiaries are and who they were not. Yeah. Because we were told earlier, no, this one bought Nando's and all that with VBS money and so on. Now, the man makes it clear that there were these donations. And to the extent that he says that they used vehicles and all that, that's what happens. I mean, if I do a deal with you, I can use any vehicle. That's how the money, the CR17 money was channeled.
All right. So before I move to Mr. Tshifhiwa Matodzi,
yeah,
just for the record,
Right.
there is no denial this time that the EFF party did receive funds from VBS.
No, there's never been a denial of that. That's why I'm saying there's nothing new. There's always been there are two. Okay, I was saying there are three things. The third thing is the loan, and that's what has always been in the public domain. Now, so you must separate what he calls a donation, which is what happens to political parties. There's no political party that doesn't receive donations. You see, let me assist you, Xoli. What is being said here is that there's corruption, okay? So I say, where's the corruption? Where's the fraud? And where's the money laundering or any crime? Okay. And let me assist you. If, let's take the worst case scenario. Let's say the guy says, okay, I'll give you a donation. He doesn't say that, but I'm just making it up. Let's say he says, I'll give you a donation if you stop criticizing me. Let's assume he said that. He didn't even say that. Even if he said that, so what? Because it's not a crime to criticize someone on a public platform or not to criticize them, for that matter. So it's not as an exchange for any corruption. What was the EFF going to get in return for not criticizing him, which happens, as I say, every time companies engage. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I was accused of having met with Maria Ramos because we had threatened to march to APSA. And her people came, it was not her, by the way, but her people did come to my office to say, look, we want to explain the reason why you want to march and so on. And I listened to them, and that was it. So I will now going to arrest Maria Ramos because he sent people from a bank because the EFF was saying things which they thought they needed to explain, which is exactly what happened here.
Mr. Kass? For public interest South Africa, the revelations in the Matodzi affidavit, what do you make of those revelations, and where should the country's thinking be about those who are mentioned in those papers?
Yeah, thanks for the question. You know, Mr. Mpofu might very well say there's no difference between those who approach and request donations and those who just sit passively and receive donations. But there's no moral or legal distinction between either of the two, because the fact of the matter is that money that was not or not to have reached the coffers of the EFF or its leaders did filter through, and money that ought not to have filtered through to them. Under circumstances where, as is explained and as it is testified, adduced in that affidavit, that actually it was a response to the negative vibes that they were getting. So that, so you could very well see that there is a cause and effect. Money would not have left VBS or Vele or any of the entities if it was not the fact that the EFF initially criticized, and then the Zuma loan, and then later on after the meeting, they changed their tune after money had exchanged hands. So there's money that was not belong to the EFF or ought not to have been in the EFF coffers in the first place did leave VBS. Poor old ladies' money left their bank to an entity that ostensibly fights for them. So we shouldn't really beat about the bush. Whether you have asked a bribe or what, but if you received a bribe, it's a crime. Yeah. Whether you received money that was not belonging to you or not, it's morally repugnant and it's legally questionable. There are answers that ought to be provided by those who receive the money.
All right. Let's deal with what Mr. Kass has just said, Mr. Mpofu, that there has to be questions about monies that were not received legally. If the EFF did indeed receive donations from VBS, why did that money have to come through Skameka? This is a company that is owned by Brian Shibambu. This is a brother to the EFF deputy president. Right. Because if you are not denying today that the EFF did receive donations, then we know that those monies came via Scamega.
No. So let me first correct Tebogo. He says, which is correct, if you receive a bribe, whether you've asked for it or did not ask for it, doesn't matter. But that's the whole point. What does it mean, a bribe? A bribe for what? That's the point I'm making. If a company gives another company donations, we have a letter from Helen Zille saying to the Guptas, thank you for your generous donations. That it doesn't mean that we don't know the conditions under which those donations were given. Yeah. So a donation does not equate a bribe. That's what I need to explain to him. Yeah. So that's the first point. Then come to your question. I'm not saying, I didn't say anything about how the money left this or whatever, or who received it or didn't. I'm saying to you that even on the Matodzi version, I don't think the Matodzi version should be taken seriously. We shouldn't be sitting here, at least the one thing you said correctly in your introduction was that we're talking about a convicted fraudster. Now, that alone, in law, there's something called a cautionary rule. When you are listening to evidence, even in a court situation, evidence of an accomplice, let alone a convicted fraudster and criminal, just an accomplice, if we do something, Tebogo and I, and then I testify, but we did it together, the courts apply what is called a cautionary rule, because that evidence is prima facie unreliable. Okay, so that's where the thing comes from. Yeah. So now I'm saying, put aside the cautionary rule. Even if you take it at face value, it is exculpatory, at least as far as the specific leaders are concerned. Now, whether the money, as I've said, if you use a vehicle, the 1 billion rand that was paid to Ramaphosa was paid through SPVs. That's how the donor wants to do it. That's how the donor wants to do it, or that's the arrangement that is made. It doesn't really matter. The point of the matter is that a donation to a political parties survive through donations. Before the Political Party Funding Act, so this happened in 2017, according to Matodzi, and that act came in place in 2018. So one thing I can assure you is that when we have a rally, when we have this and the other, we go and ask for donations from people. It's not a crime.
It may not be a crime. You want to come in, Mr.
Yeah, assuming it was a donation, as you rightly put that question earlier, why did he have to go through many other hops before it go to the EFF? Because he says the donation to the EFF. And why would there have been a need to backdate contracts to make it look regular contract? In circumstances where it was just a donation. So if Helen Zille wrote a letter saying, thank you, you gave money to the DA, so be it. Right. The money didn't leave a coffer of Vele to go to the DA or of the Gupta to go to another entity, another person.
How do you know that?
And then before it goes to Zille. Because that's how it was reported. It was reported, and as she had confirmed in the letter, that the monies left, they received a donation from the Guptas.
Right. So, Mr. Mpofu.
Yes.
Simple question. Now that the EFF is open about receiving donations from VBS, how much money in total did the EFF receive? Okay.
I don't know what you're talking about, the EFF being, now that it's open. You must listen to everything our leaders have said from the day. One of the things, for example, I think there was, I don't know if you guys were participating, there was a media conference that was held by the president of the EFF. It was kind of a one-on-one. And he said, look, I don't know why these people are saying these things about, I've never met those people of VBS. The only person I ever met was a guy called Matodzi. So that's what I'm saying. So there's no revelation in this. So unless if you said, look, you said you only met Matodzi, now it turns out you've met this one and that one and that one. So that's already been done. The other thing is the confusion between two things. Between the donation and the loan. Okay, which is what Tebogo, the mistake he's making. The issue of the loan to Scamega is separate. Even according to Matodzi, that happened on a much later separate occasion about renovations and what have you. So that's the point I'm making. And we don't know as to what what prompted that as opposed to the donation. Because all I'm saying is that I'm dealing with these things systematically. I'm saying the donation is, I can assure you, if you meet a political party that says it has never received a donation, you must know that you're talking to a liar.
Which is precisely why I'm asking about the amounts, at least that were received by the EFF in totality. It has to matter, Mr. Mpofu, because at some point, we must know as a country how much money was received, because donors are not afraid of revealing that information through the new laws that have now been promulgated. So why is it a problem for the EFF to admit to this?
No, because we don't have a culture of saying, Oli gave us this amount, this one gave us this amount. Why is that? We've said this in the open. Because some people will get, who are an opposition party, people might get victimized. If Vodacom gives us 30 rand or whatever it is, we don't go around and say, no, they gave us this amount for various reasons. Every political party does that, I can tell you. That is why there was something called the Political Party Funding Act, so that at least up to the tune, if the donation is beyond 100,000, then now you're forced by law to reveal it. So, but please just listen to this. You can ask the smallest political party in the good party that got 0.18 of the vote in the ministry, that and ask whether all the posters that they put, what happened? Did it come from Ms. Patricia de Lille's salary? No, they get donations. That's what, and they don't. As I say, and except for the legal obligation, have to disclose those. That's why even the law protects certain amounts of donations. Yeah.
Mr. Kass, is there an obligation on parties like the EFF, particularly given the public interest here, and given that this bank took deposits from the poorest of the poor, who today are still fighting for whatever monies could still accrue to them? Is there an obligation on parties like the EFF to make these disclosures?
First of all, there's an obligation, a moral obligation, to not take such monies. You know, when you know that this money belongs to people who are needy, and you know there's not even an intention to even repay if it's a loan. Even the monies that were ostensibly given as loans to Skameka, we know they were used to fund Grand Azania somewhere in Pefeni, Orlando West. And we know that even some of those, that 6 million, I think that's the figure, correct me if I'm wrong, some of it filtered through to the EFF. Not all of it was used to channel it into Skameka. If I still recall, you correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, wrong.
But yeah, okay. If I'm wrong, suppose I'm wrong, which we shall accept. It is how much of that 6 million has the EFF repaid to VBS?
Okay. Again, let me.
If it was Skameka has repaid to
yes. Well, Skameka has repaid every cent of money that was paid to them. That's the first thing. The second thing is that again, and I'm sorry to have to correct Tebogo again for the third time. Yeah, you can't say the money should not have been taken. I mean, every bank has got money from poor people. Every bank. So if the ABSA or Standard Bank donates to political parties, which they do, by the way, every year according to their size. So you must say, no, I'm not taking the money because some of it is from some poor person. That's nonsense. Even Vodacom takes money from poor people.
Can I ask this question?
No,
can I
wait.
quickly intervene?
No, let me just explain, because there's this thing, you know, this moral blackmail about all the money from the poor people. The money of the bank is the money of the bank. You can't say, no, this one, this is some investment returns which they got in some, and this one is from some gogo, and this one is from whatever. I'm not saying what happened there was morally right. He's right about the moral thing. But how do you know beforehand? That's what I'm saying. So even when the DA took the Gupta money, they didn't know if later it turns out that that money was, I don't know, stolen somewhere in some heist. What must they do? They must say, oh no, we should not have taken it in the first place. It doesn't work like that. Let's come to the real world. Yeah.
Well, let's come to that real world. Because when the VBS chairperson, Mr. Matodzi, approaches the EFF, it is on the basis that the EFF's public commentary on the matter has a negative impact on the bank. And we know that this is as a result of former President Zuma having received a loan from them. So the matters were already public about the struggles of VBS and why the former president needed to pay back this loan into VBS because there clearly was already stealing from this bank.
No, you're mixing up issues. The Zuma loan thing had nothing to do with the subsequent revelations that came from the Mutau report. It was a political issue where the EFF, as Matodzi says, you must read the affidavit, paragraph 27. Matodzi says there was negative commentary, and he says as a result of that, I met with in his PR efforts, I met with the EFF, I met with the SACP. And that's why I'm saying. Then he says the SACP subsequently sent him a 3 million rand bill to pay for Birchwood for some conference. Yeah. But what it looks like is that he was doing this PR thing to patch up the negative vibes, as Teboho calls it, which came from the VBS loan. But that was prior to any of the other, the actual scandal surfacing. So that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm making the example of saying if Vodacom gives a donation, and then it turns out later that they've been fleecing all their subscribers, then you're going to say, oh no, you shouldn't have taken that money from what at that time looked like a bona fide company, a bank like any other bank. It doesn't work like that.
Sorry to interrupt. You know, the point is, even the loan itself, circumstances under which it was given or it was advanced, you ask yourself, what is it that Gameka was saying to VBS were going to be? And remember, that loan comes after the negative publicity that was, you know.
Indeed.
Did Gameka on its own accord qualify, or did it normally be able to qualify for, or they used blackmail just as they would have said, look, you gave Zuma money, I can't remember how much it was for Nkandla.
I think it was about 7 million.
If you can do that, then we simply also should be...
Now we're speculating.
Yeah, well, whatever the amount, whether it's 1 rand, Zuma couldn't have raised that kind of amount.
No, I'm not talking about the amount. You are now speculating about conversations and blackmail and all sorts of things.
But the conversation, to start with, the EFF's leaders, Julius Malema, Floyd, and Marshall Dlamini, I believe, would not have... Okay, that Marshall maybe
Marshall Dlamini, we are told, at least through the affidavit, that he was kept somewhere far from the meeting. So, but he was within the
two leaders would not have approached VBS were it not for the fact that Zuma's loan became public. And they used that to leverage and put VBS under pressure to make sure that VBS advances donations, loans, and whatever else they could extract from VBS.
Okay, now you see, that's now Mr. Khas's affidavit. None of what he's saying is in Matodzi's affidavit. All this, the pressure and that's his own version. That's the point I'm making. So people make up the version that they want to take out there. So the same people who tell us that the affidavit of Arthur Fraser must be doubted. Suddenly now Matodzi, is a holy angel, and everything he says is exactly as it is. So all this comes down to this. It's the political biases of people like Teboho and the Daily Maverick and News 24 and the others who believe what they want to believe and exaggerate it as he's just done it now, and connect the dots, quote unquote, even if they are non-existent. or you must just be fair. That's all we're asking for. We're not saying people must not scrutinize. We're not saying Tebogo's organization or the media, that's why I'm here, must not ask these questions. We're just saying just be fair. Don't embellish. Don't read into something which is not there. Don't take away from that which is exculpatory or which explains what happened. Just, just be fair. That's all we're asking for.
The reason why we may come across as being unfair or as being hard on how we, or as being biased, is because we were bad denials from the onset by both the EFF leaders, Julius Malema and Floyd, who denied ever having received any monies from VBS. And they were actually even saying, we can even open up our accounts to show you that neither the EFF nor us have received any.
And this is exactly the point, Mr. Khas. But I have to take a break because when we continue this conversation, there's even, there's an EFF member who is said to have been pushed out of the party because he went out publicly and said this was actually discussed within the top structure of the EFF. And as a result of that, he was the political victim. So we'll continue the conversation. And we continue with our special focus on the VBS Mutual Bank collapse. Former ANC Limpopo treasurer, Dali Mpofu, including others, they've since been charged with the looting of about 2.3 billion rand from the now collapsed bank. The party's spokesperson in the province of Limpopo is Jimmy Machaka, who also joins this conversation. Mr. Machaka, good evening to you and thank you very much for your time. Let's understand from the ANC's perspective in Limpopo, what is the status of the individuals who have since been charged with this matter? Dali Mpofu is among the people, and I think Florence Radzilane. What is their status within the party or perhaps even government?
Good evening, Toli, and good evening to all your guests and all viewers. Firstly, we must indicate as the ANC in Limpopo province that we welcome the conviction of Mr. Matodzi. And we also welcome the fact that on top of his conviction, he's able to cooperate with law enforcement agencies in taking out the further truth to the public. But you will understand that Comrade Dali Mpofu has since stepped aside as a leader of the ANC when this matter came to the public space. And this is so because he has been criminally charged. Secondly, you will notice that the deputy chairperson of the ANC, Comrade Florence Radzilane, remains the leader of the ANC. And this is so because in terms of the policy of the ANC, Ms. Florence Radzilane has not been formally charged by the law enforcement agency, and therefore there's absolutely no basis why she ought to step aside.
All right, let's bring it back into studio. In fact, that's a very interesting comment because perhaps we should have started with that question to you, Mr. Mpofu, as a political representative of the EFF.
Right.
Whether the EFF welcomes the conviction of Mr. Matodzi.
Of course. I mean, a fraudster of that magnitude, if you've read his 68-page affidavit and not just concentrate on the one page that deals with the EFF, you'll see that he paints the sordid picture of a person who intentionally, over a long period of time, embezzled funds, with the CFO, that gentleman called Truter, and the CEO, and so on. Yeah, so there's no doubt about it. If he did even half of the things that he says in that affidavit, then his conviction is more than warranted. In fact, the 15 years is light. Then, which is why, by the way, you have to be cautious about his affidavit, because this was done in the context of bargaining for a lighter sentence, which he did receive.
Let's talk about Thembinkosi Kgaola. The EFF would remember him very well.
I remember him very well.
What led to him leaving the party?
He just got disgruntled and he went to join, I think, NUMSA. This had nothing to do, you're mixing up facts again. What happened is that after he was removed or was not deployed or didn't get whatever he wanted, he then started defaming people. And you see, this one is right on my alley, because at that time, I was the national chairperson of the EFF. So every meeting, national CCT meeting of the EFF was chaired by me. And I can tell you that Khawula, what he was talking was absolute nonsense.
When you say he went about defaming people, what exactly did he say?
He said a whole lot of things. I think he was even, he said, on the topic that we're talking about, he said that there was an admission that the EFF, I can't even remember, it was the EFF or specific people, had received money from the...
from VBS?
From VBS, yeah. Now, I'm telling you now that that never happened. That is not to say the money was not received, but I'm saying in a meeting that I would have been chairing of the Central Command team, that did not happen. I'm telling you that as a fact. We can bring Khawula here.
But the Supreme Court disagrees because it found in his favor.
No, but...
so it couldn't have been defamatory if the Supreme Court spelled it in black and white?
No, the Supreme Court, how could the Supreme Court find that this was said in a particular meeting? How could it do that? I mean, it just use common sense. No, it's not the finding. The finding was that the case of defamation against him could not be sustained. It doesn't mean that if they were asking about what happened in a meeting, they would have called me or him, and we would have had Haji Baji. That didn't happen. So how could they find that he was telling the truth? I don't want to get into legalese. The fact that the SCA might find in your favor in a defamation case doesn't necessarily mean that what you've said was true. It might mean that the other side did not disprove or whatever. As I said, I don't want to get technical, but I'm telling you as a fact, Kholi, that what that gentleman was saying was untrue, at least.
But if it was untrue, it was then defamatory. But the Supreme Court says, no, that could not have been defamatory.
No.
That is not. That is why they actually said he was entitled to make such comments, because there was a basis. It was
public interest.
Public interest. There was also another element of it, which there's some truth in what we're saying. You know?
Okay, you see, now you're forcing me to talk about the law. Public interest. If I say Oli stole my water and it's in the public interest that I must say so, the fact that he might not actually have taken the water does not mean that it's defamatory, what he's saying. I don't want to
so you couldn't sustain a defamatory charge at the Supreme Court, in other words?
Yes, but that does not mean that...
he never defamed anybody, in other words.
All right. Gentlemen, let's continue to bring into the conversation Mr. Machaga. Mr. Machaga, let's talk about the municipalities that bent over backwards, and if the affidavit by Mr. Matodzi is anything to go by, those officials were put under immense pressure to make sure that these investments were flowing into VBS. What is the status of those municipalities, and what has been done, by the way, against the very officials whom came under pressure from people allegedly such as Denim Caesar?
Look, ourselves as a party, our position has not changed as far as this matter is concerned. One, we still remain firm that whoever that have participated towards the collapse of the VBS must be brought to books. All municipalities that were actually affected, who made investments, some which did not even receive those investments back, we have directed our deployees in those respective municipalities to subject whoever officials that has invested this hard-earned money from the public purse to be subjected to corrective measures. Some of the municipal managers have been suspended. Some are actually being prosecuted and are attending courts on various occasions. We have indicated that CFOs who have accepted to break the law must also suit. And I'm very happy with the status in that all those affected institutions, indeed, there were corrective measures. And we have also further, as the party, directed that where it is feasible, there must be all attempts to recover whatever that could have been lost as a result of that unlawful investment. That is how far we have went as a party. And let's also clarify one aspect relating to the deputy chairperson of the ANC. When you examine the affidavit of Mr. Matodzi, there is no way he's making any indication that the transaction he allegedly made were directed directly to the deputy chairperson of the ANC, Ms. Florence Radzilan. You will notice that in the affidavit, he himself says, we have deposited this money into Mushate company. And there is nothing further to suggest that Mushate company in return have then given this money to the deputy chairperson of the ANC, Comrade Florence Radzilan. It could possibly be true, I may be wrong, that some of these monies that were actually generated from VBS through the engagement with Mr. Matodzi, various names of leaders and politicians were actually dropped in order to receive those money. However, they've never received, they were never given to whoever name that they've used in order to secure such funds.
Yeah. Florence Radzilan, the person you talk about, as you mentioned, she's a very senior politician in Limpopo right now. She's a deputy chair, but she also serves in government in her capacity as MEC. Has she ever appeared before the party's Integrity Commission?
You will notice that this matter is not coming to the public for the first time. Previously, yes, she did. She did explain her role in the entire saga. And up to now, there is no any shred of evidence that will suggest the ANC to act otherwise, even on the strength of this affidavit that is in the public space. One, there is nothing new than what was also said by Terry Mutau in his report that warrant the ANC to relook into that matter. However, in the event there is anything new, in the event there is any other evidence that suggests the ANC to act on this matter, we can assure you here now that the ANC will, without a fear, act on her. But as of now, on the strength of this affidavit, I do not think that it helps the ANC either way, because these issues have always been there and there is nothing new.
The VBS scandal. And with me for this conversation, Advocate Dali Mpofu. He is in his capacity as former chair of the party. Debo Kas is with an organization, it is called Public Interest South Africa, and on the virtual platform is ANC Limpopo spokesperson Jimmy Machaga. Let's come to you, Mr. Mpofu. You've mentioned Daily Maverick on a number of responses, and I'm thinking...
That sponsored white monopoly capital reg. Yes, I have.
Let me say this to you, and that is that Polly van Wyk, who has been the lead reporter on this story, is quite clear that all of her investigations, they were based on the money trail, the money flows, and how these monies would end up in the bank accounts of the EFF leaders. Now, here comes Tshifhiwa Matodzi, the person who had personal experience, because he is the man who tied up these deals. And he goes and mentions in some way or form corroborating what the reporter at Daily Maverick has been saying. Is it mere coincidence that there is an affidavit now that tries to stitch together this evidence in almost a similar way that Polly van Wyk has said through her reports?
No, Mr. Mgambi, you see, unless if you don't know the meaning of corroborate, how can an affidavit that says the exact opposite of what Polly van Wyk was saying corroborate her? Polly van Wyk's so-called money trail says, as you correctly say, the money went to Floyd Shivambu and Julius Malema, and they bought Nando's and all sorts of things. Matodzi doesn't say anything of the sort. He says the exact opposite. The worst thing he says is that he volunteered and offered a donation to the economic freedom fighters. And that's what I'm saying. Any prosecutor worth their salt will not take that thing seriously. Otherwise, they must arrest all of us. We received a donation from Standard Bank, we received a donation from Patrice, we received a donation from this one. Well, arrest us or kill us. But that is not what Polyphant Veik was alleging. So it's another fallacy, this nonsense that this affidavit suddenly corroborates. There are three separate versions. There's the Polyphant Veik version, there's the Motau version, and then there's this affidavit. Of those three, this affidavit is the most helpful because it really puts the issues in perspective as to how did these people meet even in the first place? Why did they meet? It was because of the negative publicity, which I've explained to you happens all the time. And in the course of that, who offered what or who solicited what? It actually assists. If there's anything, even from this discredited person, is that it refutes the version, the exaggerated version that Dali Maverick has been pandering.
Just out of interest, just out of interest, why did the EFF never open a bank account with VBS?
No, but I've explained to you. The monies that are donated to political parties, I told you the 1 billion rand that was given to the CR17 was given through special purpose vehicles for whatever reason. That's why the law had to intervene in those instances. Sometimes, as with the example of the Zweli Mkhize so-called payment, he also says that money was paid to a service provider. That's another way that political parties get funds. In the case of the SACP, he says that they sent him an account and they paid it directly for Birchwood. Now, that's the point I'm making to you, Xoli. How does any of that corroborate the kind of nonsense that Polyphant Veik has been peddling? Where? Just give me, no, I'm asking you a question. Where does it say that the money ended up in the Msiza thing? Where does it say, or rather, in the Matodzi affidavit, where does it say that the money ended up in whose bank account? Where?
There's a legal phrase for it. It's called, or criminal phrase for it. It's called money laundering.
No. Okay, no, sorry.
It smells like money laundering. It quacks like money laundering. It sure sounds, it ought to be money laundering because the money is not given direct. A pertinent question, why didn't the EFF open a bank account with VBS to legitimately accept the funds instead of having them move through other channels?
Because, yes. Mr. Mpofu, let me say this. No, wait, Mr. Mpofu. Let me say, you asked me a question.
Yes, okay.
And you say, where did this affidavit corroborate? If on the one hand, you say that this affidavit, if anything, it dispels some of this, you then have to ask the question, why, on the basis of this affidavit, if this was the person to give money to the party, he advises that that money will best be channeled through you as a party opening a bank account with VBS.
Yes.
Why did the party never do that and instead accepting to take monies through SPV's special purpose vehicle?
Yes, but only that's the point. Why it's a decision that was taken at that time. But is it a crime to take money through an SPV? That's what I'm asking you. And to assist my friend Tebogo, money laundering is when you hide money. If what you're saying, for example, about taking the money, and then you take the money to conceal criminal activity. What is the criminal activity? Not criticizing VBS in a rally. What kind of rubbish is that? So what was, when you launder money because you want to hide criminality. That's the point. You have to ask, what is this? I'm asking both of you. What is this underlying? You might say, okay, you could have done it through this vehicle or that vehicle or through the EFF itself. Well, if you want to arrest us for that, for not using your preferred method of obtaining the money, well, do it. But don't criminalize something that happens every day with every political party and even with individuals for that matter.
Okay. Mr. Kass?
The underlying crime, if there is to be a crime, is that the EFF leaders went to Matodzi and put... Matodzi went to the, whichever way it happens. Matodzi approached EFF leaders, and EFF leaders willingly and through their own volition attended to a meeting with Matodzi.
Correct.
Where such arrangements were made when they knew full well they were not entitled to the monies that ought to. So that conspiracy happened to defraud the bank of the savings of the old poor people.
No,
gentlemen.
So that means every donation is fraud then?
Out of time. The ANC has to give final thoughts.
Okay.
Mr. Machaga, is there a need, you think, for the ANC to apologize to the people of Limpopo? Because Limpopo was really heavily defrauded here through these municipalities.
Indeed, Toli, there is actually a need, because apart from the fact that our grannies, our parents have lost their hard-earned money, professionals have lost their careers. Some are not able to be employable elsewhere. And it will be very important that in future decisions in all levels of government, we need to make decisions that are within the boundaries of the law. Of course, the truth is becoming to come out. Yeah, of course, it's also taking such long period. But we remain hopeful that at the end, this will be saved. The people of Limpopo should fully understand that they applied. The ANC put their interest at heart and will continue to serve them with distinction. The matter of VBS, never again will it happen in our province and under our watch. We will do everything necessary to prevent any future recurrence as far as matters such as this or similar to this in our province.
Jimmy Machaga, spokesperson for the ANC Limpopo. Advocate Dali Mpofu, I've got to thank you for coming through in your capacity as former chair of the EFF.
It's a pleasure.
Teboho Kas, thank you very much on behalf of the organization you lead.